everybody. Today we're going to be building in a game called Trainz. We are going to be building a freelance style route. It is going to be partially freelance and partially modeled after real life things. This is the Chattanooga sub. And first I'd like to thank Approach Medium. He is a huge inspiration to a ton of people, and especially me. I've wanted to make videos like him for a long time, and I finally have the proper equipment and I'm in the right frame of mind to be able to do it. So here it is. So yeah, starting off, this is a freelance slash replica slash kind of whatever I want route that is roughly, very roughly, modeled after the Chattanooga subdivision, which is a subdivision that runs from Nashville, Tennessee, across the South Tennessee, into Alabama at some points, and then Chattanooga is its final destination, quote unquote. I grew up relatively close to the Chattanooga subdivision. I've real fanned it for years and years and years since I was a little kid. Places like Cowan and Tullahoma and Normandy, Wartrace and Bell Buckle and all those spots around the Chattanooga sub. So yeah, starting off, this area that I'm modeling right now is I'm just doing work around Suwanee. This is the Suwanee siding. It's freelance, it's very iffy in some spots. It's not like the real thing, but I do my best to make at least the track arrangements at very least kind of relatively close to the original. Sections like this with the shrubs, all I'm really doing is kind of making a transition between the farm crop and the trees. So it's not just bare bones, you can't see all the tree trunks all the way through. It kind of makes more of a wall like it does in real life, kind of like a natural barrier. And then I'll come through around the shrubs that are next to the tracks and kind of make tree lines and stuff like that, which is very realistic with how it is in real life. And just messing with a couple settings because my draw distance was a little messed up, which I still haven't fixed, and I gotta go back and fix it. So yeah, just putting some grease spots down, and then I'll take the same shrub spline that I'm using, put it on both sides of the tracks, kind of make, like I said earlier, a natural barrier. And this spot of the route is very freelance. This is probably the most freelance spot on the entire route so far. So I go through, and here I'm just making some hills, but it's kind of up to my own tuition in this spot. I'm trying to make it look as realistic as possible, kind of make natural barriers with stuff like tree lines and shrub splines and hills and ridges and stuff like that. And here I'm kind of just building up the foliage on this ridge line here, this kind of on the left side of the tracks. It'll make, when you're sitting at that crossing, it'd be at the far north end of the Suwanee siding, it'll make it look way better because it'll have like a mountain range kind of in the background and stuff like that. This took me forever. This doesn't look like a lot of time, but in real life this took me probably 30-40 minutes just to build up this mountain ridge knoll right here. It was a pain in the butt, man. I like the end effect. I think it came out pretty well, but yeah, it was a pain in my rear end. And again, just coming through, filling it in with some foliage, and just kind of building it up as much as possible. I use a lot of speed trees, which are the high definition trees in the game. They're not like the billboard trees, which are just copy and pasted images that are kind of just in an X or a triangle or whatever. They're the 3D trees in game, because I have a decent computer and I can actually run certain things. And I'll have a high graphics version and a low graphics version when I do release this map at some point, so people that might not have as good a computer as me can come through and actually play the game without frame drops and stuff like that. A little bit of a jump cut. This is probably 20 minutes later. I was kind of running around looking at the map, getting ideas of what I need to do. This is right before Anderson on the Chattanooga subdivision. Anderson is a really big mine of some sort or quarry of some sort. I'll have to look it up. I'll actually throw in the video what it actually is right here. LaWasse North America of Tennessee Inc. is located in Sherwood, Tennessee, United States, and is a part of the non-metallic mineral mining and quarrying industry. LaWasse North America, blah, 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 blah. Pretty much, it's a non-metallic mining, mineral, quarrying place. So yeah, coming back from that half attempt of 20 minutes of research. Yeah, it's a mineral mine. In this spot, I'm just trying to make it as realistic as possible. In this area per se, it's very overgrown and wooded. Not the track per se, but just the area around it. It's very deep, wooded, just mainline track, middle of nowhere. And that's kind of how it is leading up to Anderson. I mean, it's literally in the absolute middle of nowhere in some spots. So, relatively speaking, it's pretty realistic. And with how I rough in foliage next to the track, I kind of have a particular technique that I do kind of by myself. I don't know if many other people do it. So I'll take my copy and pasted trees and just kind of maybe clip them onto the track a little bit, like it's okay to kind of over flood trees onto the track. And then I'll come through and just delete a bunch of them in the path of the track. And the effect in turn is very, very good. You don't really have to worry about making sure you have to move individual trees, and in some spots you can literally put down 2,000 trees in any given spot, like the mountain between Swanee and Cowan, which I'll show you at the end of the video in the cinematics, is got a bajillion trees in it. Like, there are so many trees and so much foliage, and it helps me a lot be less time consuming and get more to the point. Plus, the effect is really good without me having to overwork myself and possibly burn myself out of my own creativity. And in this spot, this is the lead into Anderson. This is the starting of the track building in Anderson. And the entirety of the track layout in Anderson, except for maybe like one spot that I took a little bit of inspiration from for Anderson, it's all freelance. So people who are big fans of rail fanning around Anderson, which is very unlikely for you to be watching my video right now, don't get mad at me for not doing the exact track plan. I might come back later and do a Lawast replica. But until then, this is what I got. I eventually do end up switching out this track for some other track. I can't remember what the name of it is. But you can pause the video at any given moment and see like the KUID number in the bottom right of my screen, I think. And the reason I end up switching it out is for some reason the base game JR track that is in Trainz 2019 has a very low draw distance, and no matter what I do, I cannot seem to make it any better. I went through settings, I went through all the in-game settings, in performance settings, in the menus, all of it, nothing worked. So that is the dilemma I was faced with, and as you can see now, I am trading out the track here. And the ballast color on this one is better anyway because it's a mineral plant, and mineral kind of has a tendency to have that bright yellow, whitish, sandy like texture to it, and you can see it in Anderson even from Google Maps. Like, it looks like it snowed on Anderson, like just from the minerals and the dust and stuff like that that's around there. So using a brighter ballast texture works good anyway. And again, just putting some foliage here on this ridge, kind of filling up the foliage, making it more of a wooded area, more vibrant in 3D, because you wouldn't believe the difference between just going through and terraforming a big area in a mountainous, just big, gorgeous landscape with no trees. It looks very flat. Not like, say, height, but it looks very flat in way of texture. It doesn't look realistic. So just coming through, and it could even be a very sparse, small amount of trees. Coming through and putting trees on a mountain or a ridge like that helps a ton. And here I am building a little farther south. This is building towards Stevenson, which we'll cover in the next episode. Hopefully, I will be able to rough in Stevenson and Bridgeport, Alabama in the same episode. Because this route is miniature, quote unquote, and everything's kind of closer together, it shouldn't be as difficult. And I'll show what both towns look like on Google Maps in the intro to the next episode, if y'all want that. Personally, I think it'd be very aesthetically pleasing for you guys if every episode I kind of, on this particular route and project, if I kind of show y'all what I'm roughing in per se. So, yeah. Anyway, I get sidetracked very, very easily. So now we're just doing that same technique I talked about earlier. I made it the entire length of Anderson, almost to Bass, which is another spot on the Chattanooga subdivision that is just south of Anderson, which is yet another location and scenic area we will be covering on our way to Stevenson, Alabama and Bridgeport, Alabama in the next episode. So stay tuned for that. Coming back to Anderson and what is in the present, just now finishing getting all the trees out of the way and deleting them and making that wall and that barrier that we were talking about. Eventually, I moved the main Anderson spur siding line a little farther to the right of the track. That way, it gives me a little more room to implement those scenic barriers I was talking about earlier in the episode. It's just some spots and some wood line areas and some tree lines and stuff like that to kind of separate main line from spur track, or main line from town, or main line from siding even in some spots, or main line from industry, stuff like that. And here I'm just kind of putting in some of the closest thing I could find to minerals is just these ballast piles, and eventually I'm going to go through and bulk asset replace those ballast piles and put in some actual things that look good. And that little jump cut there, this is now the next day in recording. I kind of ran out of time. It was 3 in the morning putting in those ballast piles in the last clip. So I just kind of ran out of time and decided to split it into a 2 record session style video. And here I'm just taking assets from my object list and putting them into my pick list. I don't know if y'all know how to use pick lists. If you want, I can make my own tutorial on how to do that. Approach Medium has a really good one. But pick lists help a ton, and this is Cowan. This is my representation of Cowan, Tennessee. Now flying over back to Anderson the second I say that, just to mess with you. This is starting on a town. I wanted to build a town. This isn't technically a town that is on the actual Chattanooga subdivision. This is completely freelanced. I was just like, hey, I'm getting kind of bored of this sandy woodland Appalachia railroading. I want to put a town here. And I kind of just let my imagination run wild. I think the end result looks pretty good, but you guys are stuck with me for the entire building process in time-lapse form. So yeah, back to the actual building process. I kind of just wanted a single road, maybe 1 or 2 road, cut-off road, a couple back roads in this town. Nothing too crazy, very small town feel, but just something to kind of break up the monotony and the samey feeling of just going through the woods for miles and miles, because there really isn't a town since Cowan. There isn't any scenic flavor per se since the far north end of Swanee. So yeah, just putting in a couple little small town industries here, some overgrown trackage, something a little less mainline track-ish, because there is a local one that runs from Tullahoma all the way to Stevenson, I'm pretty sure. And then there's more that run all the way from Murfreesboro, which we'll get to eventually, because it is way farther north on the route. It is far past even Normandy and Fosterville and stuff like that. I mean, it is way north on the route. It's pretty much right outside of Nashville. And there's a lot of this in Trainz too, if you're paying attention to the screen, of just very monotonous lining things up, making sure everything's perfect, everything's as realistic as it can possibly be, stuff like that. Because I mean, in the end result, us building in Trainz, we want it to be as realistic as possible. Sometimes though, we kind of have to control ourselves because our imagination will run a little wild, and it'll kind of be a little more non-realistic, which is realism is kind of what you look for in a train simulator game. But anyway, we are now kind of searching for assets to place around the road, the main street here. I decided to go with a gas station in this particular area because it's very reminiscent of a lot of scenes on the Chattanooga subdivision. I'm sure we'll come across more in the future, but for now, this is kind of what we got. I love this scene, and I think it forms very, very well. So we put the gas station down, put down the tall storage tank in the back, and then we kind of put down this median concrete area to keep cars from just running wildly into wherever. It's kind of a barrier from parking lot to field. And kind of just making sure it's perfect and looks at least relatively decent. And a lot of gas stations, believe it or not, actually have these backyard style fences around them for some reason. I honestly couldn't tell you why. Maybe a privacy fence from the gas station out. That way everything surrounding the gas station isn't bombarded with gas station noise, I guess. Anyway, moving back over here to this factory area, I'm kind of just putting in some tractor trailers. Something as it gives a little more life to the scene, showing that there is products going in and there is products coming out and stuff like that. And yes, it is boxcar served. but it still wouldn't look the same, I feel like, if there wasn't those tractor trailers there, because it gives that form of realism. Again, there's a purpose for everything here. Putting down those grasses that I'm putting down right now was a mistake. That was a pain in the butt to remove because they were very in other splines, but the color palette is completely different from what those plants are, so you can see now I'm deleting them. It looks very easy, but it was a pain in the butt to try to delete all those. And here I kind of just, again, let my imagination run wild. I put down some different grasses and shrubs and different stuff like that, just to kind of give that overgrown spur track look. Because in my routes, personally, I love to have a story to them. I love to be able to say, hey, this spur, this industry track right here used to run 30 miles to a coal mine way down there. Stuff like that. This used to be served by such and such a railroad. Stuff like that. And even though it is partially replica route, I still absolutely love to do that stuff. And here I'm just kind of populating it with some boxcars. But back to like the grasses and stuff, I really let my imagination run wild with different trees and assets and stuff like that. I spent a lot of time, very tedious work, just putting a ton of different assets into this to make it look very full, very populated, very overgrown, stuff like that. Because it happens a lot. There are a ton of spots in real life and on the chat sub and places on like the BNSF and the UP and the NS and like the Appalachia area and the anthracite coal areas where there used to be spurs all over the place. There used to be millions and millions of spurs and tracks and miles of track that nowadays could be a walking trail or could just be buried in the woods somewhere and you would never know it. But like, I like having that idea of what there once was, and it gets very realistic. And as sad to say as it is, spur tracks and industries like this are fading a lot. And even on the Chattanooga sub, there are a ton of spots that are just like abandoned. Like there's a big steel mill right outside of Chattanooga that's just abandoned now. It used to be a bustling just metropolis of like steel production and stuff like that, but it's not there anymore. And due to evolution and stuff like that, and just things that they don't really have a purpose anymore. They don't really draw in as much income as they did when they were built and stuff like that. And sorry to go on that tangent, but you guys now have an idea of what my mindset is going into this and kind of what I'm thinking of going through this building process, kind of how I see things, how my brain turns. And really all I'm doing here, now you see me, I'm making my own like shrubs and grass like pick list, so I can keep this color palette, this texture, shrub, grass, barrier, whatever you want to call it, palette. And when I want to extend the track later on, I can kind of use the same palette and make it look the same, so it doesn't look like you're going through 50 shades of whatever on, through Tennessee or through this route. And here I'm putting in some signals. There's a signal right before Anderson, so I mean for a good mile-ish, there's no signals, so I figured it'd be a good spot to put them. I personally use JMR signals. I feel like the reflection off like the side of the Vader shield or whatever that they add is very, very cool, so I use that. And very reminiscent of how this episode started. I'm building those scenic barriers, and there's a lot of this in Tennessee where like when tracks go through farmland and stuff like that, it looks very overgrown from an outside perspective. But if you cross a crossing or something like that and get to look down the actual track path, it's really just a giant hallway or like valley of trees and stuff where like it's super like overgrown and there's trees everywhere, 10 feet on each side of the track, and it just runs like that for miles. And yeah, just in this area there's those ties right by the crossing. I love spots like that. I love little detail spots like that, especially on the CSX. Just on the UP and BNSF, there's not as many of them, but on the NS and like the CSX, there's a ton of them, where they're just kind of building up materials at certain crossings. I couldn't tell you why. And like where they're rebuilding track and stuff like that, they kind of just put the materials at ready access near roads, which I'm assuming for track crews and stuff like that, it makes it very easy, especially when they're using high railers and bucket trucks and stuff like that that are both road and track use. So they'll stack up like materials like ties and tracks and joints and all kinds of different stuff at those crossings to kind of put it towards their building process pretty much. And here I am texturing a lot of this. A lot of you are probably saying, why are you putting dirt under the track? I thought you used ballast, and there's the ballast. Even though most of the time you can't see the dirt layer underneath the track layer, if the dirt layer is a little bit wider, in some spots having dirt and then the actual ballast makes it look a lot more realistic, like a ton more realistic. And here I'm I'm bulk asset replacing some of my favorite trees into my copy and paste thing here, which is something I love to do. And again here, just building up the foliage as much as I can, especially around like that grain facility and stuff. Still don't know what I'm going to do with that. I don't know if I'm going to keep that spot or not. I guess we're about to find out in the next episode, if y'all want to stay tuned for that. And with this series, like I said at the start of this video, I have been motivated and excited for a long time to be making a video like this, to be making a series like this on a route building concept, or whatever you want to call it. And especially like sharing it and having a following on it, which I'm not saying I will have, so don't think I'm getting cocky. But having a following on it and have people like that are tuned in to watch it whenever the videos drop and stuff like that helps me get burned out a lot less easy. It helps me stay motivated for longer. And here I'm just putting the road out and around the corner, so it's not very one baseboardy look. And then I'm kind of putting in those scenic barriers like I was talking about. And I've pretty much withered it down at this point to like 2 or 3 trees in the actual scenic barrier or whatever, as opposed to where it was over by those boxcars, where it's like 7 or 8 trees. And here I'm kind of just roughing in the outer perimeters of these fields. So in places like Kansas and stuff like that, everything is very grid square looking. It's very asymmetrical. All the fields are, everything like that. So like Kansas, Nebraska, they're all pretty much asymmetrical, perfect squares or rectangles or whatever you want to call it. Tennessee is not like that. Tennessee not only has bipolar weather, but they have retarded farm plots. And that's probably due to the fact that it's in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, which probably makes things not as easy. As you can see there, I'm kind of just picking out, sorting through which farm textures I want to use, because some of them are really bad, some of them are good, some of them aren't as good as they could be. So here I'm kind of just messing with the terrain a little bit so it doesn't seem very flat, because this area is very flat, and I'm eventually, where those trees are on the left side of this farm plot, I'm going to put a ridge again, because realistically this whole subdivision is going through different ridges and in different valleys and stuff like that, so I got to keep it as a valley. So yeah guys, enough of my rambling. I'm going to let the rest of this time-lapse play out and kind of let y'all watch the rest of the time-lapse and listen to the rest of this song, and then I'll see y'all in live mode. So I'll see you guys there. Enjoy. Welcome everybody to live mode. So a couple things I want to talk about here. First is these JMR signals like I was talking about in the time lapse. Amazing signals. I have to put the cages around them and stuff like that. But for the most part, this little area is done. Pretty much all of this is done except for a few spots around the gas station and of course over here. I'm going to put in some more details around the factory next episode. Maybe off camera, some off camera stuff. I don't really know if y'all like the tedious work like that. But yeah, just kind of showing you all around. This is the town, and the next episode we will be building farther south. Chattanooga will eventually be probably way over here, but this is all it's going to be kind of mountainous territory through here, and then once it gets into like the Stevenson and Bridgeport, Alabama area, it's going to be a little bit cooler. Plus, this is going to be an amazing spot to rail fan for like separate videos for y'all to see kind of the traffic on this route. And who knows, maybe when I release it, y'all can run your own railroads and stuff like that. So yeah, next episode, I might include a little more cinematics and stuff like that. Hopefully, I don't know, that's up to y'all if you want me to or not. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate so much just just you watching the videos in general. But I always will appreciate a subscription and a thumbs up. And don't be afraid to tell a friend. And yeah, I love y'all, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.